Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and it's time for my top 10 games of all time as of 2020. This is the 5th video in this series. If you have missed the prior 4 videos, as well as my wife's top 10, as well as Ricky's top 10, which should be coming in the next few weeks, then, well, links down below, except, of course, to Ricky's, which isn't out yet, so no link for that. Just, subscribe instead. That will work. But this is my top 10 favorite games of all time as of 2020. And I will say that based on the prior videos, there were 2 comments that particularly stuck out to me. The first is the skepticism that I would actually only have 10 games in my top 10 games of all time. And so, I will try to do what I can to fix that. And the second is going to be a lot of people, a decent amount of people actually were a little surprised or disappointed to see that Dogs of War, what you see over here, was not in any of the videos, which means either it went up or it went down. And so, I am including it as an honorary member in order to appease both those comments. I'm including this as my 11B or something like that, meaning my 11 was Through the Ages from last week's video, but my 11B is going to be Dogs of War, and really it's not 11, it's really not on this list. The problem with Dogs of War, before we get into my actual top 10, is that Dogs of War is a game I have not played since my last list in 2019, which my 2019 games of all time, whatever it was. I have not played Dogs of War since then, unfortunately. While Dogs of War is a great game, while Dogs of War is a game I really love, the lack of having played it at all in the past year has sadly pushed it. I think it ended up at somewhere like around 55, 56 in my list. And that is not a fair rating. The true problem, the real nature of any of these lists is things that we play are going to be front and center. When you play a game you love and you're like, oh my gosh, that is why I love that game so much. And I haven't had that experience with Dogs of War, and so I sadly and reluctantly pushed it out of my top 10. Last year was my top 20, and this year it didn't even make its way into my top 50. That is primarily going to be because of the pandemic, unfortunately. This is one of those games that I have not played at all due to the pandemic, and as soon as I get to the table, for all we know, in 2021, this could well be in my top 20, my top 30, somewhere in that range. I don't know exactly, but rest assured, I love Dogs of War. I'll talk about it, I guess, in a second for those who don't know. But I love this game, and it will be in my collection. It's staying in my collection. I think it's an incredible experience. Again, top 55 or whatever it is still a solid place to be, just not top 50. But that's going to be Dogs of War. So, Dogs of War, a game designed by Paolo Mori, who also designed Blitzkrieg, by the way. Blitzkrieg, fun fact, and they're going to share similar mechanisms. If you've played both those games, you're going to be like, oh, you're right, that does have an aspect of putting things down, taking the reward of the spot while you try to vie for contending. It really is a very similar game, just one's like a 20-minute game, and this is like a 2-hour negotiation game. In Dogs of War, the players are going to be taking on different houses, and you're not really you're kind of mercenary, so to speak, so you're offering your services and helping whoever you think it is most advantageous to help at the current moment in time. And then, of course, to turn around and fight them when it's advantageous to do so. Along the way, you'll be gaining favor in different houses. So to a certain extent, you are incentivized to continue backing the houses that have worked well for you, but only to a certain extent. You also want to constantly balance that versus putting your people in different spots to take the bonuses, fighting back against different houses if you realize that Joe over there has more of a positioning or favor within that house, then Joe might be doing better if you continue to advance that house, and you don't want Joe to win. You hate it when Joe wins. He's a little bit full of himself when he plays games. I don't know why you still play with him. But nonetheless, so you sit there and you fight against, you suddenly switch, you pay up a trade card, you pay a trader card, and you suddenly switch your allegiance, and you suddenly start fighting against that house that you were previously vying for. It's all about the balancing, the figuring out how you're going to push on these different channels, which houses you're going to support, which bonuses you're going to take, all in order to ultimately try to vie your way towards victory, and that's going to be my 11B, otherwise known as my 55 highest game of all time. Next up from there is going to be, did I do this list in order? Oh yes, I did. Over here we have Vindication. I couldn't find my box. I forgot to put it on the floor because it's so large. Vindication by Orange Nebula is going to be my top 10 game of all time. And this will not be a surprise to you if you watched my Vindication Should You Back It video, where I let that slip because why not? Vindication is one of my favorite games. I gotta stop doing that. Vindication is a game that is it's put out by Orange Nebula, published by Orange Nebula. It has had multiple Kickstarters, and I have backed all the Kickstarters. It's not true. I did not back the first. I went all in on the second one with the Leaders and Alliances expansion, and then I got the extras and whatnot from the Chronicles expansion that most recently was on Kickstarter. And Vindication to me is ultimately a cube pusher Euro game. I have a review on the game, and it is more of a dry kind of game, ultimately its implementation, very mechanically mathy of, well, if I go here first and I convert these 4 cubes into those 2 cubes, and then I follow that up with going to the library and get a bunch of cubes here, and then I rotate those cubes to move my cubes into my influence, to my conviction, and I rinse and repeat, then I go fight that dragon creature, roll a bunch of dice, and then move around to the inn to collect more companions. It's all about trying to math out the perfect combination of points that will ultimately reward you, along with going for these traits. These are these traits, the relics, and the monsters you'll be fighting across the game, all in order to get you as many victory points as possible in order to hopefully win the game. Winning games is generally why you play most, not why, generally the point of most of the games you play. And Vindication is supposedly supposed to be a narrative experience to some degree, but ultimately it didn't really deliver in that sense, and for me, I'm fine with that. I appreciate the puzzle of what it is. For me, there are many things that I look at when I say, this is why I like games, and some of those commonalities are going to be powers, abilities, and puzzles. The nature of trying to figure out a pathway through a set of variable criteria to try to figure out how you can win when others don't see that path as clearly as you do, or don't have those powers, those abilities, those things that they've built up in order to deliver the win. Vindication is going to deliver on all fronts. It has powers, it has abilities, those relics and those companions, those all augment what you can do on your turns. And then of course the puzzle of trying to figure out how to go here, then there, then here in the most efficient way to win the game. And then, if you still want the story, the Chronicles expansion that was just on Kickstarter did add story to the game. It added this aspect of when you acquire a new companion, there's a bit of a story behind it. Perhaps you encounter someone in an alley and someone's betrayed and you do this or you do that. Do you chase off the gangsters? Do you threaten them? What do you do in terms of trying to do that? And those come both with a story aspect to it, as well as a gameplay consequence. There'll be a thing, well, since you chased off the companions, you get one more trait in courage or whatever it is. They're going to adjust the actual story plus the mechanics behind the game itself. And I love Vindication, clearly. Vindication is a game that every time I play it, I want to play it again right after. It's one that I need to try 2-player because I'd probably get to the table more if I played a 2-player. But as it is, I play this one a decent amount of time, and compared with, Dogs of War, which I sadly have not played, Vindication is a game I've played multiple times over the past year, enjoyed every single play of it, and really want to get to the table again with expansions, but I don't need the expansions. They're good. From number 9 is going to be that Stefan Feld game that I talked about. So you can actually, I'll leave it off camera for a second. Last week's video when I talked about Castle of Burgundy and said it's my number 1 Stefan Feld game, and then I realized I was wrong, or I thought I was wrong, I wasn't certain. There is indeed another Stefan Feld game that I enjoy more. And if you watched my top 10 most played games in 2020 video that I did with my wife, which I had a lot of fun doing that video, by the way, but if you watched that video, then you should know what it is. And that is going to be Bruges. Bruges, a game that was recently on Kickstarter with a reprint. Bruges is going to be my favorite Stefan Feld game. In 2020, it overtook Castles of Burgundy. And part of that, going back to what I talked about with Dogs of War, part of that is going to be because I played it so much, which could be a pro and a con. You can get bored or sick or tired of it. I don't remember how many plays I got, but I had something like 15, 16 plays of this in 2020. Perhaps more, I don't remember what the number was. But I've played this one a lot, and I enjoy it every single time. A lot I enjoy it. It is a puzzle. Again, that puzzle aspect. Every round you have 5 cards in your hand. Each one of these cards is going to be slightly different from decks of hundreds of different cards, especially if you have the expansion, which I certainly do. I have the Bruges, the city on this win or whatever it is in here, in this game. And those cards are going to represent different abilities, different things you can do, different ways you can try to figure out how to win, which houses you'll score points for, which things will earn you money, which things will earn you the ability to build canals more easily. You're doing all this while trying to balance the various scoring mechanisms of the game, the various ways you can score victory points in Bruges. And that puzzle of dealing with that hand of cards and seeing, well, I have 5 actions. I'm going to need workers for this. I'm going to need money for that. I guess I'll convert this red card into 6 money because of the die over there. But then I'm going to use that 6 money to augment that, to utilize that boat while building a canal. And then from there, I'll be able to put down 2 workers, put down a house, and put a person into the house. And that is what I'm doing on my turn. Because every single hand, every single round, your hand of 5 cards represents so many different things. Each card you can do 6 different things with. And you have to figure out which of those 6 things is most advantageous to you, knowing what you already have on the table, what you have in your hand, what your plans and goals are, what you're willing to risk, hoping you'll be able to draw later or maybe pull from the discard pile. All of those things combine into a puzzle of how to play the game, and it does so in a fairly decent playtime, coming in around 60 to 90 minutes fairly consistently. I find when I play it online, it's closer to that 60-minute range. In person, it tends to be about 90 minutes, a little more, fiddling around with setup, cleanup, dealing cards, all that kind of thing. But overall, Bruges is an experience that does not disappoint. Every single time I play it, I enjoy the fight, the puzzle, the tenseness. I would say that If I was playing 2 players, I prefer Castle of Burgundy. Playing at 3 or higher, Bruges will rank higher for me. It is an excellent experience, and it is one that overtook Castle of Burgundy this year for me, which is kind of a big deal, honestly. I really, really do like Castle of Burgundy. Coming in at my number 8 is going to be Food Chain Magnate. Now, Food Chain Magnate, if I recall correctly, I don't recall correctly, it might have been 3 or 4 last year, my number 3 or 4 game of all time. Food Chain Magnate is going to be a Splotter game design, which has a terrible box that I can't show you anything. There we go. This side's semi-pretty. Food Chain Magnate is going to be a Splotter game that is my favorite. Yeah, it's my favorite Splotter game, as evidenced by the fact that none of the other games on this table over here are Splotter games. And this is going to be one in where you're running a fast food chain. And the way my friends and I refer to this game is economic warfare. It's technically a Euro. It's technically about economy. But ultimately, it is about attacking each other, knowing which fronts to push on, where to retreat, where to pivot, where to withdraw, knowing how to fight that fight. Because in this game, you are doing a bunch of things in order to ultimately win. You're managing your restaurants. You have your waitresses. You're vying for third order. You're vying for different abilities, these milestones that will give you competitive advantages no one else has. But then you have to feed the people, and you have to give them what they want. So first, you have to make them want what you want to give them, which might sound like a confusing sentence, but the idea here is marketing. In this game, you're going to be marketing the various things that you want to give them. So perhaps you want to sell pizza, so you start marketing some pizza. Now all the houses in your neighborhood want pizza. That's great. You're producing pizza. So your friend comes in and he starts selling pizza, and he sells it at a bit of a discount. So now suddenly they're buying the same pizza that you spent money marketing. You put up these posters, these banners, these flyers, whatever it is, all about pizza, and they're buying it from Jimmy over there. What is it with me and J names? I always give J's. Janice, Jenna, Jesse, Jimmy, John, I don't know. Carl over there undercuts your pizza by $1, and suddenly all these people in the neighborhood are using your advertising dollars and buying pizza from him. So what do? Well, along comes Sarah. You see how I switched it up there? Sarah comes in and starts advertising drinks, fast food drinks, and perhaps hamburgers. And suddenly Carl is no longer selling anything because nobody wants that anymore. It's all about pushing on different fronts, from pricing, from offering the food, from advertising the food, from knowing all these different ways to push on the various neighborhoods. Perhaps you completely withdraw from that neighborhood and go to a far more productive neighborhood, also building a few houses, a few real estate developments that will increase the people, and those people can afford to pay more money too, so they start buying your stuff at more of a return. Every single thing in Food Chain Magnate is about knowing the levers to push, knowing where to push, to pull, to try to ultimately get what you need from that economy and turn around and destroy your opponents, because this game will involve destroying your opponents. One thing I talked about when I did a response to Tom Vassell, who put out a whole why he didn't like Food Chain Magnate, and he had this thing of how someone else won by like 800 points, which is crazy. Food Chain Magnate is not a game where it's like, 100 points versus 98 points. It's basically a binary win-lose. The person who wins will usually crush the other people by the very nature of having a better economic engine. Do not think of it as a scoring mechanism. Think of it as winning or losing in a binary sense. And from there, my number 7 game of all time is going to be Cyclades. Cyclades is the second game that I'm talking about in my in the Matago trilogy of games, and that should tell you already that there's another game on this list, which wouldn't be a surprise if you've heard me talk about games. But Cyclades, I'm holding this box tight because I got everything in here. I have all the expansions. I have Titans. I have Hades. I have everything else. Is it Hades? I think it's Hades. I have Titans, I have Hades, I have a whole bunch of all the other expansions for this game, all those little promos, everything else, so I'm going to put this box down so I don't have to keep holding it. But Cyclades is a game that I love because of the bidding in the game. This is another game that I did a review of recently. Like I said, I have been trying to slowly go through my favorite games and give reviews of them, put them out on the channel. But Cyclades is a game that I love the bidding. Yeah, it's bidding. I love the bidding of the game because you're going to be bidding for the favor of gods. And it's not just knowing that you have to bid this, you have to bid that. It's knowing the board state. It's knowing what other people are willing to pay. It's knowing how beneficial Ares is to someone else at the table this current round, and whether you should get in this round paying far too much, or maybe you let everyone else outbid each other, go higher on tracks, you withdraw to Apollo, and suddenly next round you get to walk in and get the same thing. Last round everyone else paid 7, 6, 5 for their various gods, and this round, because they're all depleted of money, you pay 3 and get the best god. There is so much positioning, so much knowledge of when and how to push on different fronts, knowing when you can afford to lose to Ares, because it doesn't really matter, you're not the one who's currently being threatened, because the war god, the god of war, whatever it is, you're moving troops around the board. It doesn't really matter if, let's think of a name that doesn't begin with S or J, or Jonathan. Jeez, I can't do it. Jonathan. Mark over there is going to be trying to bid against Ares and take Ares, but you're not threatened by Mark because Mark is far across the board from you. You're all the way in your little corner. You don't care if he gets Ares, so you let him get Ares. All these aspects of knowing when to push and when to pull, knowing which gods to fight for, knowing when to manipulate the various monsters and creatures that come out, which buildings to build, how to spend your money, how to increase your economy in the board, taking control of various trade points, taking control of various islands, or perhaps retreating to Apollo and adding more cornucopias to your empire so you can slowly but surely grow while saving your money money, and it really is a phenomenal game of balancing all these different aspects to it and how you are going to win, which pressure points, which levers are going to give you that best leverage. I've said it before. I like powers, I like abilities, I like puzzles. Cyclades delivers on all fronts, and I love the bidding of it. I love pushing someone else to another track when they clearly wanted to win on the track they were on, and now no one else is outbidding them, and so they're stuck paying 6 for Athena, which they never wanted to do. Which brings me to my number 6 of all time, which is going to be Coimbra. Coimbra, a game designed by Virginio Gili and, I can't do this, and Flaminia Brasini. I really should practice. Italian designers, I really feel bad. I need to get some of these designers' names down. I just don't know how to pronounce them, and I really should practice before these videos. But Coimbra is going to be one of my favorite games. It's going to be the same designers as Lorenzo Il Magnifico, and Lorenzo Il Magnifico, I believe, is rated higher than Coimbra, but for myself, Lorenzo is a good game. I own it. I enjoy it. It's in my top 100, probably, maybe, I don't know, but I still enjoy it. I still own it, but Coimbra to me takes the cake, absolutely. Coimbra to me is about that aspect of managing different economic tracks. There's going to be 4 economic tracks in the game. There's going to be guards, money, movement, and then ultimately just points. And then there's going to be cards that come out in each of these rounds across 4 different rounds. And you have to figure out what you're going to do to get those cards. It has a similar aspect of Cyclades of knowing when and how much to push on different things, because what you're going to do is you're going to be drafting these dice that are rolled, and you're going to take a 6, and you're going to put a 6 down, which is great, because the 6 will mean you will have first pick of that row. It also means you're paying 6 for it. Maybe I'll take a 2 and I'll put the 2 down, and the 2 means I will have the last pick of that row, but I'm paying 2 for it. Knowing when you want to pay in a game that has such a tight economy that you can rarely afford to overpay for things when you didn't need to. Knowing when and how to pay for these different things, and then using your money to instead pay for other voyages instead. Knowing all the economic aspects of this game while you slowly advance on different tracks, because sometimes paying 6 for the right card will pay itself off within 2 rounds if you've done it correctly, if you know which card benefits your engine, which card combines with the cards you've already acquired, which card pushes you higher up on the track, locking in those 12 points. In a game that goes to roughly 100, 150 points, locking in 12 points and knocking your opponent out of those 12 points can be the swing you need to win the game. Coimbra provides variable options on the table, managing all those options, and then utilizing those dice for the second sequence in terms of maximizing your bonuses. So that 6 might sound good offhand, but if it doesn't activate a track that is beneficial for you, if that 6 was green and your green track is low, you will get a minimal bonus out of it, compared to taking the 5, which means you get second pick in the game, but instead will activate your orange track, and your orange track means you're going to get 7 money out of that. There are so many different levers to push, so many different things to be cognizant of as you play Coimbra. It is a game that plays very well 3 players, has a little bit of a phantom player putting different dice down for you, kind of. Very well 4 players. I have not played it as 2. I believe there's like expansion stuff, sort of. Not a full-on expansion, but there's some expansion stuff for it that I really should get my hands on. But that, ultimately, is going to be Coimbra. Which brings me to my number 4, I want to say. Where are these boxes? I think the boxes are out of place. Which brings me to my number 5. That's what it is. My number 5 is going to be Zombicide Black Plague. Now, Zombicide is a game that I have and will continue to talk a lot about. Zombicide is a game that is... it's so much fun. It doesn't have that tense competitive nature that, well, most of these games will have. Magnate, Cyclades, Vindication, Bruges, Coimbra, Dogs of War are all tense competitive games where you have to manage that aspect. But some games that are cooperative will still give me that feeling. Cooperative games, I find, as much as I enjoy them, they don't have that tense head-to-head that makes me love them so much, because I like that aspect of facing off against an opponent, facing off against some mechanism of things that I have to try to figure out that puzzle aspect, again, puzzle, of trying to figure out how to win against somebody else who is using the same knowledge that I have, who's played the game with me again and again and again, and we face off in this battle of who can actually win the game. And competitive cooperative games do not give me that experience. But some of them, if they're good enough, give me an experience that is almost as good, or I guess in this case of Zombicide Black Plague, better than most of these other games. Because Zombicide Black Plague is so much fun to sit there and go through the game and start opening doors and hordes of zombies pull out. And so suddenly you and your fellow 6 survivors, not 6 players, you have 6 survivors in the game, ideally controlled by 2 or 3 players in my own recommendation of the game. And so you're controlling 2 or 3 characters each, basically. And then you're going to manage those 6 survivors, running around the board, trying to keep them alive while you slaughter hordes of zombies, while you run from abominations until eventually you can find either the dragonfire or equipment or whatever it is you need to take out those abominations and win the game. This game is about survival, and it has so many cinematic moments in it. There are so many times where I can sit back and remember that time where you were firing down from the tower into that horde of zombies while 2 people were there trying to stay alive while zombies approaching from every single thing, and then you managed to last for 6 rounds, and the abomination finally came in and killed the 2 of you, and it was the worst, but then that was the distraction we needed to escape out the exit, getting those objectives out the door. It really does have cinematic moments. It is a game, like I said already, that I recommend playing it at 2 or 3 players. I do not recommend playing it at more, at least not until you are familiar with the game and already know that you like the game, if you like the game. It is a game that I really recommend some of the expansions. You want to pick up a few of the things just to make the game more variable. The initial 6 heroes in the game are great and will last you a certain amount of time, but getting more heroes will increase your variability. Getting more abominations, or more specifically special, unique abominations, is key. It will really mix up that experience. Getting the wolves from Wolfsburg. The Wolfsburg expansion adds towers and wolves, and I love the wolves. The fact that you have these wolves that get 3 activations, that makes every time you open the door a genuine question of whether you are going to live or die. Because if you open that door with no actions left and there's 2 wolves staring you in the face, you better hope that you have allies close nearby who can take them out, because those wolves will tear you to shreds. You have to know how to manage them. The Deadeye Walkers will add another puzzle to the game. Zombicide is a game that, to me, when I think of, I have to do a video at some point on my top 10 essential expansions, and I guarantee you the Zombicide Black Plague expansions will be in the mix. There are expansions that are nice. They do something fun. And then there are expansions that really genuinely, in my opinion, are essential to the game. And in fact, one more of the games off the side over here is going to have that situation there as well. Which brings me to my number 4, a game that I frequently debate whether I prefer Zombicide or, well, my number 4. And for those who've watched my content enough are going to know that that is going to be Cthulhu, Death May Die. Cthulhu Death May Die is going to be another game by CMON, and it's going to have a very similar feel to Zombicide. It's going to have that aspect of characters that you go through this dungeon sort of scenario, ultimately trying to figure out how to win with different scenarios, objectives each time. You're going to have characters and abilities, and you're going to roll dice. Actually, do you roll dice? I can't remember. You don't roll dice in this game. No, you don't roll dice. What am I thinking? No, you do roll dice. I'm losing my mind here. You roll dice in terms of trying to inflict insanity or madness upon yourself and or hits upon the other characters, the other monsters in the game. It's going to have a lot of similarity to Zombicide. In fact, I want to do a play this, not that on Cthulhu Death May Die versus Zombicide. I want to compare the two and contrast which one I like better, which you apparently already know, but more specifically why I like Cthulhu Death May Die better. What are the things that make me consistently consider Cthulhu Death May Die a slightly, and keyword is slightly, a slightly better experience. You see, Cthulhu Death May Die has different aspects. I would say the most impactful is going to be that character leveling up, which is so much fun, because as you level up your characters in Cthulhu Death May Die, ultimately what is really happening here is you are going insane. Every time you hit a new tier, you get a new ability, and those are so much fun, but if you make it to the end, you die. You go insane. So you're leveling up even as you know that if you do it too fast, if you do it irresponsibly, you will lose the game. You will die. I guess technically you don't lose the game when you die, but it does bring you closer to losing the game. But what I love about Cthulhu Death May Die is that every single time I play this game, or at least like 9 out of 10 times I play this game, it is a climactic finish to the game. It is an aspect of both you as the investigators, as well as the Elder One, are leveling up, getting increasingly more powerful in an epic face-off that you either win by the skin of your teeth. That's not the word. What's this expression? You win by the something of your something. I don't know. Or the skin of your teeth. What in the world am I saying? You win by the something. Yeah, there's an expression here. You win very closely, narrowly, or you lose very narrowly. This game is so much fun because both of you are leveling up the entire time, and both of you are getting progressively more powerful. And so every time it hits you, you get more insane and you get more powerful, more abilities. But every time you destroy it, it takes on a new form with new abilities that will make it harder and harder to defeat. I love that climactic finish to Cthulhu Death May Die. Any game that promises me that climactic acceleration. And Primal, which is a game that I recently reviewed, it's on Kickstarter, I guess now, probably as we speak, or maybe today. I think it's going up today. But Primal is going to have that to a small degree. It doesn't have it as much as I would love. It doesn't have that pure crescendo of climactic acceleration. But it does have both you and both you as the heroes or whatever, the monster hunters, as well as the monsters do have some form of leveling up throughout the experience as you fight each boss. And I like Primal a lot, and that's going to be one of many reasons why I do. Which brings me to my number 3, 2, and 1 of all time. And before we go into these, I will say that I genuinely keep going back and forth. Which of these is number 1? Which of these is number 2? Which of these is number 3? I have gone back and forth multiple times to the point that the game I'm about to pull, my number 3, I considered strongly doing this year whether it would be my number 1 game of all time, which should give you an idea of how close these are and how they could really change at any time. And even now, as I look at them, I have semi-doubts. I don't have doubts about 3. I have doubts about 2 versus 1. So, Innis is going to be my number 3 game of all time. Innis is going to be the 3rd game of the Cyclades Innis Kemet trilogy, and it is my favorite. Not by far, I guess. Cyclades was right behind it. Kemet was last week's video. Innis is a game that I like it more than the others because of how clever it feels, which, interestingly enough, is why I think it probably doesn't do as well in general. Innis is going to be more about the cleverness of the board as opposed to the pure military might. It's going to be a game in which you have to understand that you win through one of 3 different areas. I put up a review of it just recently, a few weeks ago, and you're going to be winning through one of a few different areas in the game, and you have to know how to push to get there. You have to know how to, do you build up your army, which is helpful but not always essential? Do you try to worry about positioning? Do you throw down sanctuaries one at a time? Do you build up a hand of epic tail cards so that when you do push for that win, other players cannot get in your way because you just have too many reasons why they won't stop you that turn? Do you burn through all those epic tail cards thinking you're going to win this round, only to find out that apparently they could stop you this turn, and next round you're still trying to win, but now with no epic tail cards in your hand? It is a game about the clever positioning of how you have to achieve your victory and how you will achieve your victory. It plays regularly in a range of around 90 minutes or so, which is why it is not my favorite of these games, but the reason I frequently debate making it my number 1 or number 2 is because it is the shortest playtime of these 3 games that I love so much. And that shorter playtime does mean that I do play it more than any of the other 2, even the ones that are ranked higher than it. And so Innis is a great game that I frequently recommend. I frequently tell people to check it out. Obviously, if it's not for you, it's not for you, and that's fine. But it is one that I find people don't really know what to expect out of it. They walk in expecting another Kemet, another Cyclades, and it is a very different puzzle. It is a very different beast. My first few plays of Innis were fine, but I was still trying to figure out exactly where it fit in my collection. But as I learnt the puzzle being presented, as I learnt it was more about positioning and control than actual combat, I realized how to win at Innis and how rewarding it was to kind of sneak in that victory when by all accounts, with only 4 people on the board, you should have lost, hands down. Which brings me to my number 2, and this is the one where I do debate strongly whether it should be my number 1, is going to be Terraforming Mars. Everything crammed into this box, which of course the box lid is on upside down. Terraforming Mars is going to be by Stronghold Games, and of course I went all in on the most recent Kickstarter with the deluxeified everything. Honestly, I may well sell that, because I don't know if it'll add to the experience or make it harder to get to the table. I am not looking for games that are harder to get to the table, and by the way, Terraforming Mars is a game that is already pretty long, because I play this game only with the drafting mechanic, and I recommend that you play it with the drafting because it is so much more rewarding when you do, or at least if you like drafting like I do. Now, it does add to the game time. It takes a game that is roughly 2 to 3 hours and makes it 3 to 4 hours to drafting, which is why my second essential expansion, which when I eventually do a video, it'll be on that list, is going to be the prelude expansion to Terraforming Mars, which gives you a bit of a head start to the game and it accelerates the game. And I think it is basically essential as it is, but if you're playing with drafting, it's basically 100% essential in order to minimize that extra gap of time. The Turmoil expansion for the game, which is the only other expansion I've really played with other than the board, Hellas and Elysium, the Turmoil expansion to the game is going to be great, but it is going to add time to the game. It's going to add 30 to 45 minutes to your game for an already long game. But Terraforming Mars is so much fun for a variety of reasons. First of all, it plays well solo. So if you enjoy solo puzzles, this is one of those games that I actually do pull out and play an hour and a half, 2 hour game solo on the table, which is immensely rewarding. And it's well balanced solo too. It really does have a tight finish where every single time I play it, I win in like the last round or the second last round of the game. You do not finish it early and be like, well, that was easy. Or at least I don't. I'm sure you do, which makes me feel, well, I feel totally fine, honestly. But Terraforming Mars is about building or terraforming Mars. You're going to try to be accomplishing 3 different objectives. You're going to be trying to add oxygen to Mars, increase the heat on Mars, and get the water onto Mars. And doing that the entire time, you have to balance exactly how you're going to try to get that through these cards you're going to be getting, because I love the tenseness of getting these cards in your hand that you need to play, but you don't have enough money, and so you are frequently giving up cards you love because you have to pay for every card that you keep. Not just that you play, but every card you choose to keep is going to cost you money that could otherwise go towards other cards, otherwise go towards winning a game. You have to balance that. You have to sit there and say, this card is essential, but it's going to stop me from playing this card this round. And it's more important that I get my engine up and running, and you frequently should be getting rid of almost anything that isn't going to be played within a round or two. Almost anything. There will be exceptions, of course. But that balance, that constant struggle of drafting cards, of hate drafting too, it's so much fun. The fact that you can't afford all your cards means you will be able to hate draft because you're like, hey, I can't afford everything anyway. I may as well deny Janet. I want to say, something with Jace. I always want to say it. I want to deny Richard, that card over there. And so you're constantly trying to figure out what you need to buy, how you're going to afford it, what aspects of your tableau you are building and escalating. Are you increasing your steel production? Are you increasing your titanium production? Are you focusing more heavily on plants? Are you focusing on energy and heat so you can just drive up that heat track, scoring terraform rating every single round? Everything about Terraforming Mars is so immensely rewarding that by all accounts, it may well be my number 1 next year. I mean, in this year, it's still hard. It is so hard to pick my number 1 and number 2. But Terraforming Mars, for me right now, is still my number 2. But if I continue to play this game, if I continue to experience every single thing this adds, maybe some more expansions, although I believe Prelude is considered the best expansion generally. I have not played with Colonies. I have not played with the other one. I can't remember the name of it, but I have not played all the expansions. I do own all the expansions, and I'll see. Maybe that additional 3D terrain that I get from the big box expansion, maybe that'll be enough to push it over. I don't know. Maybe. Who knows? And by the way, there's Terraforming Mars, a dice game, and there's Terraforming Mars Ares Rising, Ares something or other. There's basically a few more Terraforming Mars games coming out. I love how with the Ares one coming out, they're announcing it's going to be Terraforming Mars with 200 beautifully illustrated cards. Because if you don't know, Terraforming Mars, even though it is one of the highest rated games of all time, and in my opinion, deservedly so, at the end of the day, it does have a mediocre at best production quality. The art is subpar, the components are subpar, not the worst I've seen, but not deserving of one of the best games of all time. Which brings me to my number 1. My number 1 is going to be the third CMON game on this list, and it's a game which you have heard me talk about. It's going to be Blood Rage by Eric Lang. This is a game by CMON, designed by Eric Lang, art by Adrian Smith, gorgeous miniatures, gorgeous area control, so many decisions to be made in this game as you sit there across 3 different ages trying to vie for control over, well, Midgard or whatever the Viking area place is. It's a game that's going to have drafting, which, as already said, is one of my favorite mechanics. It's going to it's a game that has powers and abilities. You're going to be drafting cards that are going to give you your military might. They're going to be things that help you win battles. They're going to be quests that will up your various stats as well as giving you points, and points generally are how you win this game. And they're going to be clan abilities or warrior abilities, different abilities you can put down, monsters you can recruit, all these different things. And so you get handed a hand of 8 cards, and there's 4 of those cards that you feel are essential, and you reluctantly and against every single shred of whatever pass 7 of those cards on to the person to your left, wondering what or how you're going to do and praying that you get at least one of those cards that you really needed back in your hand. It's a game that you have to manage both what you are drafting as well as understanding what your opponents are drafting, as well as being certain not to draft them cards that will help lock them in the victory. That Loki strategy, and the game has a Loki strategy I think is excellently done. The Loki strategy is the premise that you can win or you can benefit in this game by dying, which means it's not always as simple as simply having military might, because if someone else can win the game by just dying a little more efficiently than you can, that's a balance that you have to be aware of. It's a balance and a puzzle you have to figure out how to stop it happening. Maybe you don't go head to head with that person. Maybe you find cards or abilities that in some way mitigate how damaging they are. Maybe you dip into the Loki strategy a bit as well, so that you are not only depriving them of just having a host of Loki cards, but also rewarding yourself a little bit when you die occasionally here and there as well. I find in this game that a balance of trying to win while understanding that you will not win every single battle is usually a good combination to trying to win this game. And I love how every single time I play Blood Rage, I will try or see new different strategies, new pathways, new combinations of cards and things that I can do to try to drive home the win. I have been playing Blood Rage for years now, and every time I pull it out, it is an epic experience. Every time I pull it out, I find myself in that third age, standing up at the table because I just can't sit down while I sit there and draft cards hand to hand and try to lock in my positioning on that board, trying to recover from that epic defeat where you swept all my warriors into Valhalla last round. Fortunately, I got a few points from it because I drafted that other card. Playing down that sea monster in a terrifying moment where you understand that you will simply not win in the battle in the sea zone anymore for the rest of the game, although of course you could win. Perhaps doubling that up with a Loki card that gives me 12 points every single time that a sea vessel dies, and then having my boat die, re-recruiting my boat only to have it die again because of other cards I comboed with it. The combination of cards and abilities in Blood Rage make it an epic experience every single time. If you like drafting, Blood Rage is a no-brainer. If you like area control, Blood Rage is a no-brainer. If you like powers and abilities, Blood Rage is a no-brainer. The expansions in this game are nice. They are. I think the Mystics of Asgard, the Gods of Asgard, the various Kickstarter extras, they are all nice. But I will say that none of them, in my opinion, are essential. Core Blood Rage is what I fell in love with, and Core Blood Rage is a game I would be happy to have, even to the exclusion of all the extras that are nice, but are just nice. They are far from essential, in my opinion. And that is going to be my favorite games of all time. My top 10 favorite games, or 11 if you include Dogs of War. And that's going to be a wrap for 2020. 2021 should be interesting. I wonder which will be changing. And then the top echelons on my list, I think they change less frequently, less often, because they're kind of more mentally locked in, and I play them a lot, and so they get locked in by playing it again and again as well. A game like Dogs of War, I can get in 2 games and it can bump up 7 positions. But a game like Terraforming Mars vs. Blood Rage, I have to play like 7 games for it to get that incremental 0.2 necessary to overtake Blood Rage. the higher they up, the more they will stay in place to an extent. But we'll see how next year goes. I am tracking my stuff over time, and as I do this year over year, I hope to show the progression of how different games changed or adjusted in my own collection over time. I think it's an interesting thing, and I tend to like data to begin with, so this is just one more implementation of that. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I really enjoyed sharing my top 50 games, 51 games of all time, and I will see you in every other video this year, but I'll see you with more lists along these lines in a year. Have a good one.